big Chelsea fan, as you'll see from his green screen background. I'm missing my green screen. That's the thing about being on holiday. I'm missing my green screen. So this is very tame of a background. It really is. I'm missing my Max Headroom style background. But Yunus has got his all set up and ready to go. So without further ado, let's hear from Yunus. His link, of course, to his channel is in the description as well. But let's hear what he's got to say about Tammy Abraham.
Hello, guys. So, Tammy Abraham being linked with Arsenal. And I've been invited to give my opinion on this, especially from a Chelsea point of view. As you can see, I think I have a good inside scoop on what Arsenal would be in for if they actually did pull this off and get Tammy Abraham. Now, the thing from a Chelsea point of view, and I think we're kind of split, if I'm being completely honest. In the Chelsea fan base, we have one group of fans that are happy with Tammy Abraham, despite him not playing that much, but want him to stay because he's a Chelsea Academy player, because he's come from the youth ranks, because he's, Chelsea in and out. They want him to stay. They just want him to get that opportunity and hopefully become Chelsea's main striker in the future. With the other side, I think me included, we're not necessarily fussed. If he stays, he stays. Great, cool, no problem. If he leaves, he leaves. If the right money's offered, cool, see you later. No problem at all. Because, like me, personally, I don't necessarily see him making it as Chelsea's #1 striker, especially when we're linked with an Erling Haaland. We brought in Timo Werner, who hasn't really killed it in terms of conversion, scoring goals. He's killed it overall in terms of his performances, and he's contributed a lot. So I don't want to really go into the narrative of Timo Werner's flop, because from a Chelsea point of view, he certainly hasn't. He just hasn't converted the goals, but he's offered everything else for us, leading up at least to winning the Champions League. We need a striker to come in and put the ball in the net. We don't necessarily feel Tammy Abraham is going to be that guy. Now, if you give him the opportunity, who knows? Maybe. But do Chelsea have that time to give just an opportunity and see what happens? No, we don't. We need someone who's going to come in, bang in the goals, and put Chelsea as one of the favourites, if not the favourite, to win the Premier League title, because that is our aim now. We want the title. Let alone try and retain the Champions League. That would be historic. We'll see what happens, but we want the Premier League title now. It's been a few years. Since 2017, we haven't won it. Tammy Abraham, personally, I don't feel is going to be that guy. So, if Arsenal were to come in 40 million, because that is going to be the price, anything under that, he's not for sale. He's 40 million or bust. I think we would accept it. And if he does go to Arsenal, what do I feel? I'll be honest, I won't be worried. I'm not worried. I'm honestly, I don't want to sound cocky, I don't want to sound, antagonizing, but I wouldn't be worried. I don't necessarily believe Tammy Abraham suits Arsenal at all. Why? Let me explain. Tammy Abraham is someone that I believe needs to be offered a lot of supply. He's not a striker to come deep and create, or to come deep, win the ball and start going past 2 or 3 players. Not like the impact that Aubameyang has. When you look at Arsenal and the way that they've played, Aubameyang is someone that I think everyone can agree is world class. You look at him and you just know, yeah, he's a top striker. Come on, he is. It's Aubameyang. Cool. You look at Lacazette, was brought in. He's decent. I like Lacazette. Personally, I like him. I don't think he's fantastic, but I like him. He's decent. Aubameyang has had to do it all alone, I feel like. And even he's not been able to save Arsenal. And that's Aubameyang. Tammy Abraham coming in, I don't think will make that much difference. Now, if he was a striker who we know is able to create, is able to link up from deep, is able to, take the ball and create loads of mayhem, cool. He doesn't. As I've said, he's someone that needs that supply. He needs world-class midfield behind him. If he doesn't have world-class midfield behind him, he will be isolated up there waiting for something to happen. That is what Tammy's just going to end up doing. We've seen it for Chelsea. I think he needs a midfielder behind him who's able to supply him with through ball after through ball after through ball. His running is good. His positioning is decent. Sometimes he can get caught offside, but I think his position overall, being able to help run in defenders, he's good at that. But again, if you're going to run in behind defenders, you're going to need the supply. You're going to need someone that's going to feed you the ball over the top or at least through. That way you can run onto it. If not, you're running for nothing. Tammy Abraham needs that supply. Do Arsenal have that? I don't think so. I think you look at Xhaka, perhaps. No, not really. Smith Rowe, loads of potential. I like him a lot. Very, very good young talent, but he's not there yet. He needs development. He needs to keep going. And maybe he will turn into a world-class midfielder. But apart from that, right now, I don't feel like Arsenal really have that much to offer in terms of central midfield. Someone creative. Someone that can create something from nothing. Because that is what Tammy Abraham's going to need. As I said, if not, he's going to be isolated. He also needs loads of supply, not just from the middle, but from the wings. He needs cross after cross after cross. He needs to be given the ball, basically. He's not someone that can convert in an instant like that either. This is why I'm saying he needs the supply, because if you give him the ball once or twice, chances are he's not going to put it away. You give it to him 10 times, yeah, maybe he'll put one in the net, you know? So that is what he's going to need. He's not fantastic in the air. I think in terms of crossing into the box and him getting on the end of it, he needs to work on that. That is something we've been so frustrated with whenever he plays. In the air, his heading has been atrocious for such a tall lad. And for such a lad who I know can be quite physical if he adds a little bit of mass onto himself. He needs to improve his heading. Honestly, though, I think, though, for Arsenal, I'm not worried. I don't think it would work out as well as I think a few Arsenal fans are hoping for. So that's my personal opinion. But believe you me, if Arsenal were to come in to Chelsea and say, here's 40 million, you can bet your house that Chelsea would accept it. And as I've said, myself, and I think a few Chelsea fans share my sentiment, we won't be worried. We won't be worried. But good luck. He's an Arsenal fan at heart. He was growing up anyway. Grew up at Chelsea, but growing up as a kid, he was an Arsenal fan. So maybe that will add a little incentive. And maybe, who knows, if you do get the right midfielders coming into the club, maybe Arteta can create something. Even though from the outside, let me tell you now, we're not worried of what Arteta's going to do. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think City are worried of what Arteta's going to do. I don't think even Man United are worried because of the players they're bringing in. Yeah, it's looking a bit sticky. Arsenal need a major revamp. And let me just end on this note. It's not going to be a case of bringing in the right player or bringing in, you know, a couple of players or fit in the right system. Arsenal need new ownership. That is what they need. And that's coming from a Chelsea point of view. Simple as that. From the outside looking in, it's clear as day. You need to change Kroenke. You need to get him to sell. Somehow he needs to sell that club. He needs to. You stay under him, you're going nowhere. My personal opinion. But anyway, good luck, Gooners. Let's see what you can do without European football. That should help you in the Premier League. Loads of pressure, though, with the Amazon cameras filming you guys this time. So we'll get to see what documentary we're all going to get at the end of it all. But good luck, and if Tammy comes to you lot, look after him. Thank you for having me on Gooner Talk. Catch you later. Peace.
A massive thank you to Younes there for giving us the insight and from a very much Chelsea perspective on Tammy Abraham, which is important to get, of course, from that side of things, from someone who's genuinely watched Tammy Abraham at every single part of his time at Chelsea so far and getting that side of his view. It's a real shame that not everyone in the chat box could see it in that same way. I understand getting on a Chelsea opinion sometimes can be divisive. I genuinely do. But I think what's important is that we actually respect another opinion. It's certainly not what we've come to expect from kind of the chat box we have here. I do appreciate massively some of the guys in the chat that have been thankful to Younes there for giving across his opinion on the club as well. And obviously from the outside looking in, as he says, that's all he can comment on. And so thank you again to Younes. If you would like to check out Younes' channel, then please make sure you do by clicking the link in the description. We are going to move now on to the tactical breakdown side of things, and specifically the statistical analysis from this side of things. So let's go on to that. Now, what I've done is I've looked at this specifically from a couple of seasons point of view. And looking at it kind of from the 1920 season where he was mainly banging in the goals and scoring plenty of goals in lots of games as well, because obviously he was playing a lot more. And we've also looked at it from the point of view of the 2020-21 season where, of course, Timo Werner came in and Abraham's opportunities were limited, and he was injured, of course, for a small period of the season, meaning he missed more games as well. If we have a look at him specifically, we've got a player here who's obviously 6'3", contract till 2023. He's a player that is going to really develop. He's going to improve. He's going to get much, much better with time. He's still got a long, long way to go before he obviously reaches his absolute maximum and what he can ultimately do with Arsenal. And I think when you look at someone like Tammy Abraham, there is still a lot more potential there to be unlocked. Whether or not that's possible at Arsenal is obviously going to be the biggest question here. 2023 contract means that any fee for him, you'd imagine, if you didn't have any clue about kind of reports about his figure, then it may be more open to negotiation. But £40 million that is quoted for a contract that runs out in 2023 is a lot. It is a lot. There is no shadow of a doubt in my mind that 40 million for a player with 2 years left on his deal that is surplus to requirements at a club is a lot. But Chelsea do sell exceptionally well and have done for a significant amount of time. And if they're selling players like Gay for £18 million, who hasn't played a single minute of first-team football, despite being a very good talent, and moving on to someone like Tammy Abraham, who's 23, who's obviously scoring goals in the Premier League, has proven himself to be a Premier League quality striker, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more than £18 million. It's just the way that things work. It's just the context that we have right now. But let's move forward to the main statistical analysis. Now, a lot of people asked for him to be compared to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and so that is what we are going to do. We're also obviously going to compare him to Aubameyang and Lacazette as well. These are taken from their league statistics across an average of 90 minutes. They are, for Abraham specifically, being done for both last season and the season before, in which he was Chelsea's starting striker, to get a different kind of viewpoint and see how things have changed across those 2 seasons. Starting off with the heat map, as you can see, mainly from Abraham's side of things, he is a poacher. As Yunus said, he's not the type of guy that's going to come into the box and steal the ball from a player and run towards goal. His work happens inside the box. And that's a big thing for Arsenal, because a lot of Arsenal fans, I think we would agree, think that Alexandre Lacazette fits Arteta's system a lot more because of the way he links up play, because of the way that he takes the ball from deep and links into the wide areas that Arteta likes to use so much. And Abraham's not like that, which does surprise me into why we would see necessarily that same kind of link-up play. Whereas you look at Calvert-Lewin's heat map, and it's all over. He pops up in different parts of the pitch, same as Alexandre Lacazette as well. Aubameyang's is definitely more shifted out to the left-hand side, where he's played a lot on the left wing. But that's the thing about Abraham. He's someone that, as Yunus said, needs supply. He's someone that needs to be given the ball in the right areas to score those goals. And that's always going to be the thing for Arsenal, is do we create enough chances? Based upon the first 6 months of the season, you would say no. Based off the second half of the season, you'd say we don't take enough of our chances. And based off of the pre-season game against Rangers, you'd say that we've needed a striker because we've created so many chances and not put them away that it's becoming a big problem. And that's the issue with Arsenal, is that we just don't know what kind of Arsenal we're going to get next season. We don't know if we're going to get the Arsenal from the first 6 months of last season, or the last 6 months of last season, or a team that creates bundles of chances and just hasn't got the personnel to put them away. Now, if you want someone to put them away, Abraham is a good option, because he is a good striker in terms of his finishing. If we have a look at kind of goals per 90, his XG, last season, his XG was 0.53. And his actual goal scoring rate was 0.1 higher at 0.63. So he's scoring more goals than he's actually expected to, which was an improvement on the year in which he had one of his best seasons, scoring 15 goals in the Premier League at a rate of 0.54. He did get a lot more chances to try and score last season, and his XG was higher than the goals that he actually scored per 90. But last season, specifically in 2021, we look at a player there that scored 0.1 more than the XG suggests, which actually is a better goal per 90 rating than Dominic Calvert-Lewin, a better goal per 90 rating than Alexandre Lacazette, and a better goal per 90 rating than Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang last season. So of all of our 4 strikers that we're looking at here, Abraham comes out on top in terms of goals per 90 and also in outperforming his XG for last season. So just something to think about. If we have a look at where the shots are taken from, you can see from the last 2 seasons that they are being taken typically from in and around the 6-yard box as much as possible. But specifically last season, despite playing less games, his shots were much more varied from different points on the pitch. And as we saw, his goals per 90 was still very, very good. And the average amount of shots being taken, 2.22 per game, which is higher than both Aubameyang and Lacazette, but not as high as Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But that's actually impressive to consider that he still had more shots per 90 scored than the other England international striker for Everton. Going into the touches into the box, as we've talked about before, he likes to be in the box. He's a poacher. He likes to get on the end of chances, and that's why his touches in the box are higher than any other players that we are looking at for both of the last 2 seasons. Going into the dribbling side of things, he does like to get on the ball and move, and he does like to do it more so than anyone else on this list. However, he is the least successful. And as Eunice said in the expert analysis, he's not the type of guy to pick up the ball and run at people and take them on and take it past 3, 4, 5, 6 players and bang it in the top right-hand corner for a goal of the season contender. He's the type that's going to get into the box and, when possible, smash it into the bottom corner for a good finish. So it's unsurprising to see that his dribbling successes are much lower than that of the other players. So if you are looking for a striker that's going to pick up the ball and move with it, Abraham's not your man. Offensive duel side of things, as a kind of a bigger striker at 6'3", it is unsurprising to see those offensive duels quite high, along with Lacazette, who's a player who likes to get in and amongst it, as is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But actually, his success rate in those offensive duels aren't the greatest. So for those thinking that this is a guy that's going to hold players off and win duels and stuff like that on the ball, he isn't. He's not as successful as Lacazette and Calvert-Lewin and Aubameyang in those offensive duels of trying to keep hold of possession and holding it up. He's not your link-up guy. Which again is, if Arsenal want your man in the box, your fox in the box is going to pick up those chances and score, sure. But if you want a guy that's going to hold players off at the top end of the pitch and link into play with your wide men, he's not that guy. And that does go to showing these offensive duel statistics. In terms of his aerial duels, though, he does come out quite well. He is 6'3", and so unsurprisingly, he's got a decent percentage of hitting those aerial duels at 46.2% last season, which is better than both Aubameyang and Lacazette, and only ever so slightly lower than Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who is known very well for being quite good in the air. I mean, so good he scored a couple of headers against Arsenal, I remember too. And last season, or rather the season before last, 6.37 aerial duels, and he didn't have as good of a heading accuracy as he did in 2021. But that shows that improvement in that area. And certainly if you've seen a video go up on Chelsea's Twitter page today, which not as a Chelsea fan, but I did find it quite entertaining to see Thomas Tuchel's new training methods and the losers then having to go and sing the Backstreet Boys before dinner. That was a great video. Do go check it out. Even if you're not an Arsenal fan, it will make you smile. Going into the passing statistics and looking at this specifically, as we talked about, he's not the type of guy that brings too many players into play. His passing accuracy is in and around those amongst him, as other strikers are. He has improved those passing statistics from 1920, from 72.5 to 77.9. And then when we go into those passes into the box, we've got it slightly different again, whereas actually his passes into the box has gone down in comparison to, say, someone like Aubameyang and Lacazette from 1.11 to 0.53, but his accuracy's gone up to 60%. But again, he's just not the type to link up play. I think if you want to take anything from these stats, we've learned two key things. He loves to get in the box and score, and he doesn't really like to be the link-up man in the forward line. So that's what these statistics have shown us. And that does bring an end to obviously all of those statistics again. And move on to the last point of the show, which is, of course, getting your thoughts and your feelings in the chat box. Now, before you do, please let me know if you're not keen on Abraham. I want to know your reasons why. I don't want you just slamming the guy and saying, no, not interested. Let me know as to the reasons why you don't want him. And alternatively, if you do want Tammy Abraham at Arsenal, again, would love to know some explanation as to why you feel he is the right guy for Arsenal to pursue. If you get, just while you're typing those in, to give kind of my perspective on things, the idea of just chucking the idea of Tammy Abraham away, I think, is slightly naive, because I think that, and specifically around the theory that he's an ex-Chelsea player, and we've done this too many times and taken Willian and David Luiz and Czech, I think he's a different prospect to that. And if we were talking about, say, £25 million, I think I'd be much more open to this. But £40 million, like, I can understand why Chelsea want that amount of money, especially with how good of a selling club that they are. But the thing is, from an Arsenal point of view, with the areas that we need to improve in, which I don't necessarily look at striker as an out-and-out issue unless we move one of those two big strikers on, which could happen. But right now, I don't look at that striking department as a £40 million area of renovation. That being said, I didn't particularly look at centre-back as an area of £50 million worth of renovation either. And look what happened, and I'm still quite happy about that we did the Ben White deal, or rather are going to do that Ben White deal. So that's the crux of this, is that I'd be open to it if he was cheaper, but £40 million, it's just not it for me. I was going to say a little bit too much, but actually quite a bit too much for me. Sam Trester says risk over reward, and 40 million is just simply not enough to justify that. And I agree with you, Sam. Joe says, nowhere on the planet Earth is this guy worth £40 million. I mean, when you see obviously some of the business that other teams are doing and the kind of figures, and I know that it's really bad, and I often say to people, it's not good to compare the price tags of players. But in a more general consensus, and when you get to start getting to the £40 million figures, and it becomes a kind of a much smaller bracket of market of those kind of price tags that players are moving for, it's a very different level of player, I think, on the most part. So that's the issue here for me. It's just, it just doesn't fall into that 40 million bracket right now. Tom says, Tom, would you say that because of his age and resale value, Abraham might, I'll come back to that in a sec, Abraham might be considered a better financial investment than, say, Calvert-Lewin for the board? Now, Calvert-Lewin is not old. Calvert-Lewin is 1 year older than Tammy Abraham, but he is probably about 20 million quid more expensive. You're probably looking at around 60 million if you want to try and go for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Is he better value for money than Calvert-Lewin? Based upon those statistics that we've looked at there, arguably, but if you apply the context of the style that Arsenal like to play, and Arteta, if we were honest, probably prefers his striker to be more involved with the build-up, then Calvert-Lewin is obviously a much better fit for Arsenal. And is he £20 million worth it more? I think I would be more open to the idea. And there's a couple of other factors you have to think about. Everton are a team that want to try and push for that top six. You take away their key striker, that's a big, big kind of bonus for Arsenal. And I think Calvert-Lewin as well as an England, kind of accepted England #2 striker as well. There's that factor too. I prefer him. And I think there's more potential to come from Calvert-Lewin away from Everton, whereas kind of Abraham's had his shot at a big six club with a lot of good service behind him in that 1920 season. And while 15 goals is good, it's a good return, especially kind of for how much stick he gets. I feel like if Calvert-Lewin was in that Chelsea team and was their main striker, he would have been probably breaking the 20 goal mark instead of he was in an Everton team getting much less quality service. And for me, that limits him more than, say, if he was to, say, being in that same position. So that's the context that you have to apply. Abraham's value for money at 40 million, no matter if he's 23, resale value. If you sign Abraham now for 40 million, I genuinely don't think, say, you sign into a 5-year deal, in 3 or 4 years' time, say he scores the same amount of goals or just slightly more than Lacazette, I don't think you're making too much of a profit on that 40 million that you've invested. So I'm not necessarily sure if that's the right way to go down of looking at it anyway. Thanks, Vinny. Really appreciate it. If you could hit the like button, we would really appreciate it. This is your second show of the day, considering I'm on holiday. So please do smash that like button, guys. Assassin says, why does Chelsea fans think, let's have a look, I've just gone off it. Here we go. Abraham will be a good fit for Arsenal. Fed up with the direction that Arsenal are going in right now. I think they look at it in this sense because Arsenal have historically invested in, one, the wrong types of players in regards to their age profile. This is a different, much different kind of age profile. They tend to invest in players from abroad, and it's not gone particularly well over the last 10 years. I think we can all agree. The players that we've signed from the UK have been players that are aging and mainly nowhere near the first team of those teams. And I think that whilst Abraham has certainly been ousted, that was mainly come from obviously the signing of Timo Werner and the fact that Erling Haaland is a genuine possibility at Chelsea to be coming in this summer as well. It makes sense that Abraham would be surplus, whereas at other teams like where Willian is and David Luiz and Cedric and Danny Welbeck, the players that have ousted them from their positions aren't necessarily of the same kind of caliber. So it's more understandable to see why he's surplus to requirements. That's slightly different in the context of that situation. So I think that Chelsea fans think that Arsenal, he would be a good fit. It's because he's kind of a poacher and that Arsenal just need someone who can score the goals or the chances that they're creating. And kind of a generic feeling around Arsenal for those that aren't necessarily that in tune is that Arsenal are obviously a big passing side, possession-based team that create loads of chances. Whereas if you actually watch Arsenal, as we know very well being Arsenal fans, is that we've struggled with chance creation quite a lot last season. So maybe the perception of Arsenal is slightly off from that sense. But I wouldn't let it wind you up, Assassin. That's for sure. Sam says, what would Tammy coming in mean for Balogun? And this is a really good point. I don't see him coming back in to start, so he would be a backup and slot in over Balogun. Would that mean Balogun goes on loan, or would we then sell Lacazette? Well, whether we sell Lacazette or not, it's still a big impact on someone like Balogun, because obviously as a 20-year-old striker, you've got a 23-year-old striker ahead of you that's got, a good 10 years still of playing time in the Premier League. So knowing that, it does beg the question, if Arsenal want a young profile striker, what is going on with Balogun? And what is kind of the emphasis on his future? And what kind of promises did they make to him when they got him to agree to sign that contract? So all of those things combined makes you a bit concerned about following Balogun's situation. And I think that a loan would do him well, but I'm not sure if it's the right idea to still bring in a 23-year-old striker whilst you've got this exciting young talent still to come through. And, we'll have to wait and see on this one. Let's scroll down. DN says, people turning their nose up at a player like Aouar, but wanting Abraham are what's wrong with this club. I mean, I'm sure what you've seen are people turning their noses up at Aouar. Personally, like myself, I'm not that keen on Aouar. And then other people being more accepting of Abraham. I've not seen too many people that have the same mind on both. I'm not personally. I'm not open for us signing either of those two players for the prices and the players that they're currently at, especially Abraham at £40 million. If we were going down kind of the lower end of the scale for what we're looking at, if we're going to create loads of chances, he could be a really good fit. But I don't think we're going to be going down that route. And I think we would be better off signing a striker that was a better link-up play and interacted with the wide players a lot more in regards to kind of setting them up for chances, not just them setting him up specifically. So, yeah, but I get your point. Like, I understand that it's frustrating to see kind of players that you probably rate, like Aouar, and players that you don't rate in Abraham, and then people saying, not agreeing with your point of view. It's always frustrating. It's frustrating from my point of view when I know I've watched a player for a long, long time and I feel like I've got a good idea about them. And then I feel like from the other perspective, if someone doesn't necessarily rate them and then you present them with evidence to suggest that their point of view isn't maybe necessarily correct and yet they're still not in line, that's really frustrating, but it's just part of life. Football's about opinions and it's all about respecting. Hence why I was so stringent in reacting to some of the comments whilst Younes was speaking earlier, because Younes is coming from the perspective, a very outside perspective on Tammy Abraham and just giving his view from a Chelsea perspective, which is always going to cause a little bit of friction. I understand that. And I think it was important to appreciate that you've got Younes coming on the channel and giving his views about a player that Arsenal are reportedly interested in, which I think sometimes goes over people's heads a little bit. And it immediately goes to, you're a Chelsea fan, I don't care about what you've got to say, which is just not the open-minded way of really looking at things. Answer says, I want Abraham. This is because he might not be that link-up guy now, but he's young, and I think that he has the potential to improve in that side of his game. Lewandowski was transformed from a poacher. I mean, I'd argue Lewandowski has remained very much a poacher and still a massive goal scorer. Yes, his link-up play has improved, but I still would label Lewandowski as the best striker in the world for being in the right place at the right time and for finishing chances. Abraham is nowhere near that level and certainly would need a lot of development to get there. But yes, there's potential for him to be a different type of striker for him to already be. But the problem is for Arsenal is that Arsenal don't necessarily need a project man right now in that position. They need someone that's going to come in and be a genuine clinical finisher and someone that can link up the play from day dot. And I'm not sure that Abraham is that guy right now. FT Music TV says, Tammy is the perfect striker for this project. FT Music, let me know why you think that is the case. I would love to know your thoughts as to the explanation as to why you think he is the perfect man for Arsenal's system right now. Tulip says, I thought Tammy would have been a good signing, but after watching the stats and the expert insight, and he won't suit our system, so now I have my view changed to not wanting him, especially for 35 to 40 million. That's great, Tulip. It's fantastic you've been open to change your mind, and that's not to say that if this video host has changed your mind or not. It's the whole point is that having that open mind and having the ability for that open mind to change. So he also says, Tom, I read an article from Tim Stillman, fantastic follow on Twitter. Make sure you check him out, Stillberto, where he explains why he thinks Arsenal are signing more players to play a high defensive line, considering that Tammy might be a good addition. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? If you've got a high defensive line, and you're going to kind of push all these players up, you don't really necessarily want your number 9 dropping back into the spaces and really kind of making things quite congested. You'd rather he was just the number 9 in the box, allowing those wide players and your number 10 to be the creators for him. So if we are planning on playing with kind of a high press back line in the sense they're going to push high up the pitch and force the opposition back into their own half when we're in possession, then yeah, a fox in the box kind of number 9 striker is what you want. But if you've got your defence sitting back a little bit more, like we saw last season a lot, where the defence did sit quite far back at times, and necessarily we had then so much space in the middle of the park where Lacazette dropped into those areas to pick up play and pick up chances and try and play out to the wide areas. It makes sense that change might lead to a different type of striker being targeted. So Sahil, yes, I'm unsurprised that Tim's knowledge is spot on in that area. Absolutely. FT Music says Tammy with Maddison, Saka, Smith Rowe, Pepe behind him. It just screams goals, and you'd hope that lots of chances would be created should Arsenal get those players. But it's a big if. It's a big if. And it is about those chances being created. And that's the problem, is that we just don't know whether Arsenal are going to create those chances or whether or not we need a striker that will create chances for themselves. Kevin says, Tom, I think Tammy and Balogun could push each other and raise each other's level. What do you think? Always when a player's got competition, you'd hope that they would react in the way that it would give them that kind of push and that need to improve. But the problem is that because they're just so different in regards to their levels of development and they're on their journey of development, I'm just not sure it's the same kind of thing. It's not like thinking of an example of, say, we've signed Lacazette, you bring in Aubameyang, who's a striker, and those two kind of pushing each other because they're of a similar age bracket and of development level. It didn't end up even working. I think it's slightly different because Balogun's still very much a prospect. I think Abraham would not necessarily feel too threatened by the idea of a 20-year-old that's not really played a minute of Premier League football coming through and pushing him. I'm not sure that's enough, if you know what I mean. Josh says, is Tammy a hybrid of Lacazette and Aubameyang? Absolutely not. He hasn't really got too much link-up play about him whatsoever, so you can't really consider him that kind of hybrid style of Lacazette. He's also got a lot more height than both of those, and he's a lot better in the air, so he doesn't really necessarily take any heading kind of statistics from either of those two. He's just kind of your fox in the box. The only real elements that are similar is the way that Aubameyang likes to be a bit of a fox in the box at times and not necessarily create chance for himself. But the problem is Aubameyang's been shifted out to the left flank so often and kind of has lost that element of his game as much when he's not playing. And because of that, maybe that's why we're seeing him so off form with his striking side of things. Carl Jose said his stats in the either Championship or Champions League were good. My concern is for the likes of these players, etc. I'm all for having more Arsenal in the kind of team and more in the squad, but they need to be of the right caliber. And yeah, of course, like we would love there to be more Arsenal fans in the Arsenal team. It makes sense. And it's great to see that now the new number 10 of Arsenal, Emile Smith-Rowe, has just signed a new contract, of course. And our own Bukayo Saka is number 7. It's great to see that. And they're Arsenal men to their core, clearly. But at the same time, it's important that you buy the right calibre of player. And I'm just not sure £40 million for Tammy Abraham in the system that we want to play, or prospectively want to play, is going to be the right man for that job. Anyway, thank you ever so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you ever so much for listening. Please do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. Make sure you go and give Yunus a follow on Twitter. You can find him on Twitter. As always, if you just type in Yunus, he will certainly come up. But if you also type in specifically at YunusHH, he will also be there, and his link to his channel is in the description as well. And a big thank you to him for coming on an Arsenal side of things to give his viewpoint on Tammy Abraham. And I'm sure the majority of our listeners will certainly thank you as well. We will be back tomorrow morning for the 8 a.m. show, as always, to keep you guys up to date with all the latest Arsenal transfer information. And a bit of a plug for the guys and girls over at the Highbury Scored and Sophie and Kev Campbell had a fantastic chat with Mr. Jack Wilshere. So make sure you go and check that one out as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you guys as always. I'll see you again tomorrow morning. And as always, up the Arsenal.